All right, in this video, I'm at DevCon and we're live. This is Richard Carlton. I'm here with Sterling. Now, Sterling, what's your last? I don't even know your last name, Sterling.
Last name is Rouse.
Okay, and you've been with 360 Works for how long?
Going on 8 years.
And today we're going to be talking about credit card processing on the FileMaker platform. 360 Works is one of the leaders in bringing value-added tools to the FileMaker platform. And Sterling is one of their ace staff, and his expertise, amongst many expertise, is plastic, right?
Yes.
And so plastic is a plugin that works on...
It can work on FileMaker in the client. It can also work on the server, whether it be server-side scheduled scripting, perform script on server, or even in web publishing. So it can work on Web Direct, and it can work on custom web publishing as well.
Now, if we want to use with FileMaker Go, we'd have to be connected somehow to the FileMaker Go to the server so we could send the request to the server so the server could do the work for us, right?
Correct. We would need a hosted database and then install the plugin server-side and use the perform script on server script step to initiate the plugin function call from within Go.
I want to make this video valuable for beginners as well as experts. So just at the very beginning or basic level, what does it take to process a credit card? I mean, I get a credit card, I want money. How does this work? I mean, it's in a big scheme, 20,000 foot view.
Sure, from a 20,000 foot view, most merchants who want to sell their wares and they want to use the plastic plugin to do so, they're going to need, the first thing they're going to need is a merchant account. And so the idea behind a merchant account is you've got these companies that are called payment gateways, and they're basically, like the name suggests, middlemen. And what they're middleman for is between the merchant who wants to sell stuff and then a processing bank where the actual money changes hands. And so what the gateway does is they provide a mechanism. In our case, it's usually a developer API to send calls that will allow you to perform a transaction and see that transaction completed and the money change hands and reach your merchant account.
So FileMaker needs to talk to the gateway people, basically, is what you're saying.
Yes.
And then the gateway people go out on a network somewhere and they finish transacting it at a bank somewhere?
Right. And then that transaction will settle at some point. So what will happen is that transaction will be authorized, but it might not settle immediately.
Now, this is important terminology that a lot of people don't understand. When you run a credit card, typically the money is not instantly in your bank account.
Correct.
What happens is, generally, now see if I get this right, during the day, say you're a business, you're a dog food company or a store, and you're going to do 20 orders with the credit card, and they're authorized, each one's authorized. At the end of the day, the gateway or the bank, they run a process to finalize the orders and move the money, right?
Correct. And that's usually called settlement. And you're correct. That can be configured at both levels. You know, I think where the payment gateway is helpful is that many of them, not all of them, but will give you the opportunity to set a specific time that you want that settlement to occur. And every day at that time, it will go through the log of authorized transactions, the pending ones that are waiting finalization, and will settle those transactions for you.
Okay. Now let me ask you a question. Your software, I guess, obviously allows us to talk to the gateway and put a credit card in, and we're going to see that in a second.
Sure.
Can we also refund money with your plugin?
Absolutely. Not only can you refund transactions, but you can void transactions as well. And the difference between those two concepts has a lot to do with the settlement that we just talked about. If a transaction has not yet settled, it can be voided. If it's been settled, then
the money's moved.
Right. Then you're refunding.
Then you have to refund it.
Correct.
Okay, great. So let's talk about the gateways that you support. So we can send, authorized.net's a big one. It's a huge industry one. I know big business uses authorized.net. So they're a gateway you talk to. Who else can you talk to move money around?
We have quite a number of gateways. Plastic kind of started out with authorized.net and Payflow Pro, which is a credit card processing service from PayPal. But we extended it to work with First Data, TransFirst. And we also have some gateways that are based in other countries. For example, we have the RealX gateway that's in the UK. We have Merchant Warrior that's in Australia and New Zealand. And we also have Moneris in Canada.
Okay.
Yeah.
So big ones people ask me about all the time, at least domestically in the United States, they're asking me about PayPal, right? So you do talk to PayPal. We do talk to PayPal, but it's not how most people think of PayPal. Most people think of PayPal as, if I'm going to go purchase something on PayPal, I'm going to go to some site, click a button to say buy with PayPal, and then get redirected to the PayPal site where I log in with my credentials and pay for that item, and then maybe get brought back to the site where I initiated the transaction.
That's not what we're talking about with Plastic. With Plastic, we're basically talking about a credit card only service that's akin to what Authorize.net or First Data or any of these other gateways that I just named offers. So it's really about credit card processing and money changing hands that way.
You know, and that's a good point. I'm going to re-emphasize this point because it's a good one. A lot of people will say, I take PayPal. In fact, we do this on our site when people buy our training. They say,
Sure.
we're going to place the order. They say, pay for it. And it actually goes to PayPal, actually PayPal's website, and they transact the credit card there, and then they get forwarded back to the learningfilemaker.com website as the order is completed.
Right.
Your system actually keeps you completely within the FileMaker environment.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So, you know, if you're typing on the FileMaker screen, you're never going to jump off the PayPal screen and then come back. You always stay within the FileMaker environment. You put all the information in. Why don't you show this? Run us through a sample.
Sure. So what we have right here is a simple example and kind of showing the basic criteria necessary to run a transaction. And what we're using here is a test account from Authorize.net, and the parameters that are required to execute this transaction are a merchant account name, a merchant account password, the amount that you want to run the charge for, the card number, and the expiration date. So if you have those 5 pieces of information, at minimum, you're able to run a transaction.
Now, let me just cause a timeout right now.
Sure.
So, say I'm brand new. I
Okay.
need a merchant account name. How do I just go get that? Where do I get that from?
Well, for any merchant accounts, you're going to need to more than likely go to their website. We are
We going to Authorize website or the bank's website?
You're going to the Authorize.net website. The beautiful thing about a payment gateway is the payment gateway is, in most cases, already made the inroads with various payment processors. So a lot of back-end, so when you talk about back-end payment processors, you're talking about companies like First Data or Chase Payment Tech, you know, those types of those companies. Some of those companies also operate gateways, but their primary business is being that back-end processor and moving that money around. And so a company like Authorize.net has taken the time to establish a relationship with many processors that usually, if you're a merchant, your home bank probably has a specific relationship with one of these credit card processors, and Authorize.net has already reached out to that processor and established a bit of a relationship. So once you start setting up an account with them and filling out, you know, the paperwork for Authorize.net, they're going to go ahead and handle that back end.
So say I'm Wells Fargo or Bank of America or something like that.
Yeah.
I would actually give that information to Authorize.net, like my account number, and then they would know how to route the money to my account. Is that how that would work?
Yeah, exactly. You're going to let them know who you bank with. You're going to give them, you know, a ton of information at the outset, and they're going to take that information, go reach out to your bank, and presumably there will already be a relationship with whomever that bank uses as a specific credit card processor, and they'll handle the rest of it from there.
Great. So we said all that. So basically the merchant account name and account password are going to be specific to a bank account or merchant account that you're going to have, but it's specific to you and it's secret.
Right.
So while we see it here on screen, normally this is going to be hidden information.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's go through this. How's this? Give us a
Okay,
demo.
so all right. So right now we're just going to run a basic sale transaction. Like I said, we have those 5 pieces of information. We're just going to hit the sale button, which behind the scenes is running a script, and that script is performing a function which is kind of the most used function in the Plastic plugin, and it's called CC Process Payment. So I'm going to run the charge, and then we're going to run it again, kind of walking through the script that's getting executed behind the scenes. So just hitting the sale button. We're taking in this demo file to a screen where we see the response of that transaction. Transaction succeeded, and we have a result code, an authorization code, AVS response, that stands for Address Verification Service. So there's some capability within a lot of merchant accounts to do address verification.
Now this is basically credit card theft and fraud prevention, stuff like that.
Exactly,
right?
Anti-fraud.
So some credit card companies will say, hey, you have to put that information in, right? Or
Correct.
we won't authorize it.
Correct. And they're really, when you put in an address, the only thing they're really concerned about is the zip code and the numeric portion of the address. So the number,
Okay.
the street number, right? So AVS response, CCV response. So when you're talking about those 3-digit card codes on the back of most credit cards, or in the case of American Express, the 4-digit number that's on the front, you can pass that verification code in using the Plastic plugin, and you'll get feedback as to whether or not that passed validation. And many gateways give you the ability to set flags to either reject or just give you just the basic feedback and allow you to make a decision as to how to deal with that transaction. A transaction you might still want transactions to go through but just get flagged, and you can do that. Or you can tell your gateway, hey, I want declines anytime address verification fails or anytime card code verification fails.
Okay, cool. So now this went through. This is test data, right? But
correct.
You actually went out and talked to the authorized net just now?
Yeah,
Wow.
absolutely. Yeah, their Sandbox environment is actually pretty good because it gives you feedback that's exactly identical to the feedback that you would get if you did the real thing. So we're able to see.
Tell people about the Sandbox. So we got, for beginners here, the Sandbox environment is like a test environment where we get to play with our toys in the sandbox, right?
Correct. And what we do with the plastic plugin is we actually include our test credentials for you to play around with, so you can hit the ground running. Like, this demo file is actually the same demo file that ships with the plastic product. And so if you were to open this up for the first time, having installed the plugin, you'd be able to run this simple example right off the bat by just clicking that button. You'd get immediate feedback and be able to see what's going on here. So, having said that, let's try running this again and taking a closer look at the scripting that's involved in this simple example. And so, in doing so, we're going to run this sale again.
But we're going to step through it step by step. That's really cool.
One of the things, if you're not familiar with how plugins work, a plugin's going to add a suite of external functions to FileMaker's suite of built-in functions that you can call, and the mechanism typically for calling these within a script is to set the value of a plugin function call to either a field or a variable.
Right.
A lot of times what's most important is the action being done as opposed to the response that you get back. And so a lot of times that dictates whether you want to store something in a field versus a variable. In this case, the first thing you want to do is tell the plugin which gateway we're using.
Okay.
And so there's a plugin function called ccsetGateway, and that gateway is actually authorized.net, which we have up here at the top.
Cool.
So we're going to do that, and we've actually got some error reporting scripting in here in case the result of that function call is the word error in all caps, and this is how all of our plugins work. All of our plugins will have a last error function you can call to get detailed information about what error might have occurred, if any.
And I see it on the next line, CC last error.
Yeah. So in this case, no error.
Okay.
So we're going to move on. The next thing is we're going to determine whether or not to set the plugin in test mode. Now, test mode can mean a couple of things depending on the gateway when we're talking about plastic. In the case of authorized.net, they have a separate sandbox environment and a separate production environment. You can actually sign up for an account for either of these environments, and they're completely separate from one another.
Oh, cool.
In other gateways, you might see the ability to obtain one set of credentials. So you might start off with a sandbox account, and it kind of gets promoted to a production account when you're ready to go live, and you can probably still perform transactions against a sandbox, but you're still using your live production credentials. So you have one set of credentials that can communicate with either a sandbox server or a production server. So
with authorized.net, you're saying those are separate accounts?
Those are separate accounts. So what we want to do in the case of authorized.net is we're actually not going to set this in test mode because their sandbox environment is completely separate with a completely separate set of credentials.
So we use a separate merchant account and password for the sandbox?
Exactly. So if you start off with a sandbox account and then you decide you want to go live, you're not going to use those same credentials you were using in the sandbox.
You use your live credentials.
Absolutely.
Got it. That I did not know. That's good.
So we'll move past that. Then the next thing we're going to do is what I was talking about earlier, kind of that flagship function, CC process payment. So we're actually going to take a closer look at CC process payment and see what we're doing here. And so we're going to actually bring up the script workspace here in FileMaker Pro and take a look at that.
Now, if I was going to roll this out to my solution, I could copy and paste all this out of your test file into my file.
Absolutely. We've tried to make it as simple as possible to integrate. And one of the things we've done is we've created script folders. So if you kind of look over here on the left-hand side of this script workspace, there's actually a folder labeled authorized.net. And what I encourage people to do if they want to integrate using our scripting is there's a single table in this demo file. It's full of global fields that are designed to either collect data that's going to be sent out as part of a transaction request or fields that are going to be used to record response data.
Okay.
And the idea is to take that entire table, import it into your solution, then import the script folder for the gateway that you plan to use into your solution.
So the table first.
The table
then
first.
the scripts.
Then the scripts. And then you write a wrapper script whose only job is to basically collect information that might be submitted to these global fields. You set those global fields, perform our script for the operation you want to do, whether it's performing a sale, doing a refund, doing a void. And then when you're done, you're going to poll the fields that actually contain the response information. And if you need to store any of that for posterity, you want to push that information back to wherever it should go in your database.
Sure.
That might require the creation of some data models, some fields, that you might not already have. For example, you might want to have like a settings table that contains your merchant account credentials.
Okay.
Right? And you're going to go to that.
For sure we do. We would want to.
Right. So you would go to a layout based on that table occurrence, grab that information, and then set the corresponding fields in our global table.
Right.
And then perform our script. And then when you're done, you grab the response information, clear the global fields in our table, and you can rinse and repeat. You can run another transaction. So that kind of workflow works well because the developer doesn't have to worry about the ins and outs of each plastic plugin function and what it's doing. All they're concerned about is really collecting information, putting it in the right place, running our script, grabbing the results, and putting it where it needs to go in the rest of their database.
Perfect.
So right now we're at the point where we're about to process the payment, and so we're going to perform the CC process payment plugin function. And I want to take a little bit of a closer look at that function to show kind of what's happening here. And so in a simple example, as you can see here, there are only 5 parameters here. Again, we talked about these before: merchant account name, password, amount,
yeah,
card number, expiration date.
So when we actually call this function is actually going to initiate communication out across the internet.
Exactly. Of all the plugin functions that we've called thus far in this script, this is the first one that's actually communicating with the payment gateway. And it's actually the only one in this particular script that's going to actually reach out and talk to the gateway.
So this is the go do it command, right?
This is where the
doesn't
magic
say go do it, but this is go do it.
Yeah, this is where the magic happens. Absolutely. All right, so we're going to back out of this. We're going to go back to our script debugger, and we're going to go ahead and execute that plugin function call. So as you can see, it took a second, reached out to the gateway, got us a result. Once again, we have some error handling code in our scripting.
No error.
No error. So now what we're going to do is, whereas when we set the gateway, we set it to a variable because we didn't care about storing the result of that for posterity.
Right.
We're actually going to set some response fields with relevant information from the response that we got back from the transaction.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And this gets into, if you're a newer FileMaker developer, you're thinking about credit cards, it's really a good idea to have a transaction table where, regardless of whether something was processed and it didn't go through, or it processed and it was successful, there needs to be a transaction table like the log that never changes. Even if you cancel someone out, you don't want to go back and delete their record out of there. You want to show that you had a transaction, then you can't voided it or refunded it. But it's a complete single table that has a transaction of everything. Correct. I assume you're doing something like that.
Yes. I mean, in our demo file, we don't do that per se because we don't want people using the demo file in and of itself as a POS system. It can be used as a tool to build a POS or to build something, a solution that performs credit card processing. But we definitely, as part of the integration process, encourage you to use a transaction table to keep that record of every transaction.
And of course, the record can be connected to a specific invoice or a specific contact by using relationships. But I just want, because we're at the point now where we want to save the data.
Absolutely. You're absolutely correct. So we're going to move through that. The cool thing about the CC process payment function is that it will return on success the transaction ID from the payment gateway for that specific transaction. You can actually use that data. If you wanted to, we could log into our authorized.net test account and actually reconcile that, actually see that the transaction went through and how it was recorded at a gateway level. But
so that's an absolute unique ID that will not be duplicated anywhere else.
Correct. So we've set that, and we go ahead and just set a kind of a stock response message that the transaction succeeded, and a stock field to say that the transaction succeeded and give it a 1 for success.
Great.
So we do that, and now Plastic, in addition to the plugin functions that kind of configure the plugin for use with a specific gateway and then perform a transaction, we're going to want to read specific response data. And so we have some helper functions to parse that data out of the response.
Oh, okay.
So things like the charge result, which is usually an approved, declined, error, that sort of thing. Most gateways have some variation of those three states when they're talking about a charge result. An authorization code is usually a number that comes from the back-end processor through the gateway, and then the gateway hands it back to Plastic. Then, as we talked about before, we have functions.
Address,
functions for getting the AVS response code, for getting the card code verification response. You can also get the amount that was approved echoed back. So we, in this transaction, I think
which
we asked
theoretically should match.
Yes, theoretically that should match. There are some advanced features where that's not always the case, and we can talk about that a little bit. But for this particular transaction, this is going to match what we submitted to the gateway. And then we have another function for getting the raw response back from the gateway. Now, depending on the mechanism, the programming interface that a gateway exposes to us as plugin developers, most of the time we can get a raw response back. There are some gateways where we can't get a raw response back because their gateway mechanism is very, very locked down. But in this case, Authorize.net gives us that information, and we can parse that out to get things that some people want, things that we don't necessarily have a helper function for, and we give them the raw response to give them a means of pulling that data out if they want to.
Sure.
And
that's pretty much it.
That's pretty much it. So we're going to close this down.
So that's the basics of a credit card transaction, and a refund would be almost identical. It's just a different command, correct?
That's correct. That's correct. As a matter of fact, if we move into the advanced transactions, we could actually immediately void this transaction. We couldn't refund it because it wouldn't have been settled yet.
Right.
You know, we'd have to wait until that settlement period passes, and then we could go in and refund the transaction. But prior to that point, we can do a void, and as far as a void is concerned, it's almost as if the transaction never occurred.
Wow.
You know.
Well, this is really, really cool technology. What's the approximate pricing for this product?
There are three pricing levels. We have a single user license, and that's $95. We have a workgroup license, which is up to 10 users within a single organization, and that's $195. And then we have an enterprise license, which is unlimited users within a single organization, and it gives you the ability to use the server-side technologies in FileMaker Server, like web publishing and server-side scripting.
And you also have a annual subscription for developers as well, right? Something like that?
Plastic is part of our portfolio bundle
that
we offer, and so that's the ability to basically get virtually all of our products in one suite at a fraction of the cost. We're talking about 25% of the total cost of every one of these plugins bought individually.
And that's a sweet program. I know that RCC is part of that, and that's how we license all our work from 360.
And there's yet another licensing model for Plastic, and it's in the event that you wanted to use Plastic as part of a vertical market solution that you were selling. It's called a solution bundle license, and that's $19.95, so $1,995 for a solution bundle. One-time cost lets you distribute it in your vertical.
Good. Well, just to leave things off, 360 Works has been in the software FileMaker business for a number of years. Sterling, you've been around for a while.
Yeah.
And we really appreciate all the hard work. There are projects out there in the FileMaker community that would not have succeeded without the use of 360 products. And so 360 has always filled these niche gaps where FileMaker doesn't do credit cards on its own, and FileMaker in the old days didn't do document management on its own. It didn't do, really easy integration with Word, being able to Word documents and things like that. And so there's a number of videos we're going to have on 360 products. This is our credit card processing video, and I want to thank Sterling for coming out and giving us a great demo.
Thanks for having me.
All right, this is live Richard Carlton for LearningFileMaker.com, and we'll see you next week.